Hello, everyone. I am so excited today. I've been actually super eager, and the day is here. We have a special guest who's phenomenal. His work is phenomenal. I think it's a game changer, completely. This is Nathaniel Gillis, who is a demonologist, an author, and is working on an incredible book
Mhm.
that I'm really excited about that he's going to talk about. And I just, your research is mind blowing. So maybe
Thank
just
you.
give a little bit of an intro and how you even got into this all and what you
Yes.
do.
That's no pressure, no pressure, but it's great to be on with you. And I'm humbled to, for the compliments. It's a calling, and I know people say that, but I there's a lot of stuff that I don't want to look at, a lot of research I do not want to do. And then when I take a break from it, it's in such high demand. People are thirsty for this information. There's something that's driving them to want to know what my research is. And so it's off and on, right? I get discouraged, I get burnt out, I get threatened by the phenomenon. I'm like, I'm gonna leave it alone completely. I'll just go stock shelves or something. And then instantly I get an email or something that like a case that I received the other day, which kind of puts me right back into the research mode. And it's like, okay, I have to do this. Like, I don't know what else to do with my life. But my name's Nathaniel Gillis, and I'm an experiencer and author and a lecturer. My research is centered around any and all occult connections between the phenomenon, demonology, the UFO abduction phenomenon, and how it all plays together. My center work right now, my most foundational offering is necronetics, which is what I believe the phenomenon is doing, is combining necromancy with what I call the occult genome, where it's merging science and necromancy together to further our existence and whatever these beings are. So that's my primary offering to the field, and I think that's a good place to start.
So when you say necromancy, just so everyone is clear, we're
Mhm.
talking about a death phenomenon.
Oh, 100%. Yes. And the phenomenon does seem to be leaning on ancient concepts of the afterlife and the ability to weaponize by location. And kind of unpack it, what it seems to be that some of these beings are a species of practitioner. And I'm leaning towards them having hacked the afterlife to the point where they can project their consciousness out of their body into another biological avatar, to where, by virtue of possession and pregnancy, they further their own existence. And I thought at first blush, I thought, okay, that's a good contextual framework for the research.
Hmm.
And I had some data points, right, leading me to these conclusions. Um, but I'm leaning more towards that than anything else. I think that explains the occult connection,
Yeah.
and I believe that that's where the research needs to be right now.
And when you say possession and pregnancy, can you
Mhm.
elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so possession as a phenomenon is pathogenic, and it's not defined by the Vatican. It's a phenomenon that's interreligious, cross-cultural. And so once I started diving into ancient texts about possession, that's when I realized that even in anthropology, their perception of possession as a phenomenon was as if it was some kind of pregnancy, as if you had an entity that if they were wounded, let's say this is specifically the Golden Bow, James Frazier's work, where if a person, a soldier, was wounded on the battlefield, he would project his consciousness outside of his own body, commandeer another person,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then he would survive bodily death by having a new avatar to possess. And so that's when I started looking at this pathology over and over again. I thought, okay, this doesn't seem to be just the relocation of consciousness. This seems to be sometimes almost a very early way of replicating a life form.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
so possession, yeah, right. So that's why we have language preferences. We have memories within, quote, the demoniac that do not line up with their own worldview and their experience in life. And so that's when I started asking myself, okay, that's not just that it's a relocation of consciousness, it's the replication of life. Is it possible that the incubus in literature and the dream demon in
Mhm.
folklore is the same entity that's trying to possess and try to replicate? And then that's when I started looking at the sexual pathology And sure enough, you would have possession cases and pregnancies in the
Hmm.
same cases. And that kind of bloomed into, oh my God, this is not, you know what I mean? There's certain data points where it's like it's irrefutable. I can't not see this now.
So now we have a lot of people who are giving birth to these hybrids.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I believe again, now here's the problem with my work is I'm learning what they've done for thousands of years, right? And I do believe they're still employing some of these techniques.
Hmm.
And I mean, for real, I mean, really, they're still doing an UFO abduction phenomenon. It's something different, allegedly.
Hmm.
But they're still doing it, but they're calling it, you know, the extraterrestrial missing fetus syndrome.
Hmm.
And I believe that the extraterrestrial is just a new archetype produced by these beings
Hmm.
in order to reincorporate all of the occult transference they've been doing for years, but under the moniker of extraterrestrial, where we won't question that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Does that
Right.
make sense?
So when we look at this, then this
Mhm,
phenomenon, and we
mhm,
look at experiences of ghosts, cryptids, aliens, alien abductions,
mhm,
pretty much all of the different types of phenomenon that we
mhm.
think are separate, we're looking at something that is the phenomenon.
The phenomenon, the proto intelligence, as I've coined it. You know, the problem I'm having now is that the research is so deep and sometimes perhaps so dark where I don't even have a vocabulary
Yeah.
to articulate what it is. And I was on a Zoom call the other day with a producer, and we're just hashing ideas. He's familiar with my research and vice versa. And he's like, you know, sometimes, you know, you say that you don't even have the words to talk about the phenomenon. He said, it's almost like we're not supposed to.
I believe that. I
Yes.
believe we're not
Yeah.
supposed to discover that.
There we go. That's why, yeah. So the language we're programmed to use with respect to this research, it doesn't even have words. It doesn't have a framework
Hmm.
for us to, you know, articulate a vehicle of meaning. We don't have it because we're not meant to.
Hmm.
And so that's just one example of, hey, listen, I think we're on the right track. But to your point, yes, I believe that there is a proto-intelligence that is masquerading as various archetypes. It's diversified its identity in our eyes in order for us to believe they're all separate beings.
Hmm.
And they're not, you know. It's so fascinating to me because like one of my good friends is Paul St. Clair in the UK, and we lectured together. Great guy. He's talking to me one day. He goes, you know, he goes, some of these cryptid encounters, they make no sense at all. He said, you know, he said he's been investigating a case where there is a family who was driving on a road, and there is a werewolf kind of entity, a wolfman kind of entity that's barely moving its legs but it's keeping up with the car that's going 50 miles an hour. Doesn't make sense. The cryptid is surviving in areas that does not have the food source it needs,
Right.
right? It makes me believe again that when we get too close to the phenomenon, it will weaponize one of these archetypes to the point where the archetype itself does not make any sense. It
Right.
cannot survive. Furthermore, you know, it's the gate is maybe a foot and he's slowly running, but he's keeping up with a 50-mile-an-hour car. It doesn't make sense because it's not meant to.
Yeah.
It's something else that wants to appear as one thing,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it's truly not once you push beyond the veil. And even more than that, my
Yeah.
new friend, is that now we have orbs that are projecting the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot that people are researching. And so this is a huge key point for me, a data point, because I point to that and I kind of link in other cases of parapsychology when they were looking at apparitions of ghosts and thinking that's a real entity that's trying to belong in our reality,
Hmm. Hmm.
not realizing that in the same frame, they're catching an orb projecting the apparition.
Ah, right. Yes.
Right. So what we right the most common thematic element here is not the bipedal, it's not right, it's not the even angel, it's not even angelic, it's not the apparition, it's literally balls of light
Yeah. Yeah.
that are using their abilities to project various intelligences, when in my opinion, in my approach, it's one intelligence wearing another as an archetype in order to interface with our species.
What about the electrical balls that can go
Yes.
through the walls? When I was young, our family had this
Mhm,
problem a lot,
mhm,
and they were rather large. Okay, we're talking about this ball which is
Hmm.
pure electrical. You could tell. It made a sound. It would just come through the wall. It had a conscience. It would
Hmm.
it would literally levitate around us, like inspecting us. It
Yep.
would move and watch us, and then it would veer off.
Hmm. So, corpuscular balls of light is a common phenomenon throughout all of this field,
Hmm.
right? And I
Hmm.
think that's one of the reasons why ufologists changed the term from UFO to UAP, because when people hear the word UFO, they're thinking discs,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Triangles. UAP seems little bit more pointed. It's, in a way, it's almost more ambiguous because what do you
Hmm.
call a ball of light that's just flying through the atmosphere? We don't really have a term for it.
Right.
But yes, to your point, one of the most profound cases of corpuscular balls of light I've ever heard of was the Jackie Hernandez case in San Pedro Bay, California, and that was with Dr. Barry Taff. He had literally balls the size of footballs and bowling balls and basketballs just moving. They have it on film, and they were not particles of dust, but these were balls of light that were moving through the walls. And at one point, they were communicating with an entity through the Ouija board, saw the balls of light. And then the next day, I
Mhm.
believe it was, they were tracking the phenomenon upstairs in an attic. And they had this kind of this black cloud-like entity hovering in the corner of the attic. Well, Jeff Wheatcraft was a videographer,
Wow.
went up there. This is what bothers me when people limit the phenomenon to being love and light and having no real context, or they do it, but they're lying, right? It's one of the
Mhm.
two here. But as they're looking at this entity in the corner, they're taking pictures of it and they're getting it on film. Next thing you know, they hear Jeff Wheatcraft groan like, "Oh!" and they snapped a picture. The phenomenon had tried to hang him in the attic. He's walking and he can't
Mhm.
see really much of anything. Next thing you know, a rope wraps around his neck. And he said he could feel something on the other side of a stud pulling it as hard as it could. If they would not have gotten to him quick enough, he most likely would have died. And then we would have had a death taking place, the same case study, right?
Yeah.
As orbs and balls of light and Ouija
Right.
board communication. So even at the very end of that case, they were filming one of these orbs in the corner of the room, and it kept popping, boom, boom, and then it went boom. And when it did, this maximum amount of light manifested, and then an apparition appeared.
Oh my goodness.
Right. It was animated, and it was just a half-bodied apparition. It was the waist up, but it was animated, and it
Hmm.
was looking at them. And so, at least my perspective now is, if we have an intelligence where we know it's from these balls of light, there are pictures emerging, apparitions of Bigfoot, Yeti, angels, aliens, dare I say,
Hmm.
and ghosts. Is it possible we're dealing with not the same technology, the same intelligence
Hmm.
that is doing all of this at the same time, hoping we won't see beyond the veil? We'll think, oh yeah, it's aliens.
Right. And it's studying us.
Yes, the evidence suggests that, and that's a problem even with my work, where yes, I'm experiencing it, but I'm being experienced by it.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And in a way, when we're interfacing with this phenomenon, we become co-creators. This is profound. This has blown my mind because I've been thinking about this for months. We become co-creators with the interface it incarnates as.
Right.
We're authoring portions of the experience. But that doesn't mean that people always confuse that when I say, well, they think that I'm saying that it's us that's forming the, no,
Hmm.
it's not a manifestation of us, but the archetype it manifests as is sometimes. And so it's a lot easier for the phenomenon to moderate our behavior if we feel we authored it,
Hmm.
right? Oh, we believe in that.
Right.
That's
Right.
what it manifests as. So a lot of my research is centered around understanding what's going on.
So it's hitchhiking and back and
You
pick
know,
like on us, on our psyche. It.
yes, I now I've been looking at this term hitchhiker too, because a lot of, especially in the field, people want to kind of put lipstick on a pig, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
If I can, I would call it a hijacker,
Hmm. Yeah.
because this is happening without our permission and without our own knowledge sometimes, and then it's too late, right?
Right.
Something has hijacked us. But you're right. Um, So, anyways, I don't want to ramble, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
Oh no, you don't ramble. You ramble away. I mean,
Yes.
do you think that a lot of this phenomenon will masquerade in light if it thinks that that's what you're going to respond to?
Yes.
Hmm.
You know, especially in incubi cases, that's when I really snuffed out the pathology where it would manifest as lovers, ex-husbands, ex-girlfriends. I have a good friend of mine who's a producer of a show, and it's so fascinating. When I started doing this research, I had like two or three cases and I started talking about it.
Hmm.
And then the next thing I know, I get an influx of emails in show hosts like yourself, where we would say one thing, we would talk on online and on, and
Hmm.
film on live and stuff. Behind the scenes, they would say, listen, now I got to tell you my experience.
Hmm.
And that's when I realized that, oh my God, a lot of people have these cases. I mean, this particular individual broke up with an ex-girlfriend, and then months later, after blocking her, her blocking him, no phone numbers connected, completely different lives, she shows up at his door like 11 o'clock at night. They copulate. He thinks it's her.
Oh my God.
Wakes up in the middle of the night and there's no evidence that anything even happened. He finally connects with one of her friends the next day, kind of worried, right? He's at work thinking, okay, that didn't feel right at all. That didn't even smell like her, right? She has her favorite perfume. Right? We've dated. It just didn't even act like her, but it appeared like her. And so after calling a few friends, he finally gets her number, calls her from an unknown number. Hey, listen, I just want to know how did you know where I lived? What's going on? And she basically cursed him out and said, I have no idea what you're talking about. That was not me. You need to quit lying to me and being a freak and leave me alone. Don't ever call me again. And so he's starting to realize like that's not normal.
And what are the repercussions for that action?
There we go. Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is so fascinating because yes, to your question, yeah, the phenomenon will masquerade as an angel of light. And not just that, but in order to gain trust, it will monitor or it will modify its appearance. Because number one, it wants you to apply the wrong rules,
The
which
key?
I think the key, exactly right. I think that's exactly what's going on with the alien,
Hmm.
right? To where it's like, okay, yeah, sure, it acts like it blends into our reality.
Hmm.
It acts like it's dear Aunt Edna up until the proto intelligence removes that archetype. And now we're interfacing with something that, for a reason, we don't even have vocabulary for.
Right. So when people are being abducted
Yeah.
and they go missing and they come back,
Yes.
what is really happening?
So, a groundbreaking case that I was given not too long ago was from an experiencer that worked with Dr. Turner. It's actually her son,
Hmm.
and which I'm going to really dive into and start talking to him more because I think this is groundbreaking. It blew my mind. I'm like, what? So, this experiencer was being abducted by the phenomenon, and the phenomenon was displaying another pathology that is another data point that we have to pay attention to because it really starts to open our eyes to what's going on. So this phenomenon would manifest in the home with the son, the father, and the mother present. Its target was the mother. So the son told me it's fascinating. He said that when it would incarnate, it would look like a force field moving through the house with small corpuscular balls of light moving. He said then we would watch as it would overshadow the mother as she was sleeping. Right. So are they aliens? Well, let's take a look at this. Because when she woke up the next day after they returned her, her experience was contradictory to what their experience was with the phenomenon. She thought she was taken by aliens, but what they were seeing from the outside was something completely different. The phenomenon projecting archetypes while doing its dirtiest work. This is I'm alien. Well, even more fascinating and perhaps more troubling, and I'm going to release some new data here for everybody watching. When she was returned, the phenomenon had covered her from head to toe in sigils
Oh, oh,
that lasted for 3 days. They had to take this abductee to the ER. They had to wrap her in a heated blanket because of the amount of pain these love and light beings were causing her.
And what do you think the sigils were?
Oh, okay. Austin Osman Spar was a practitioner of the occult. His finest theory, it's going to blow your mind, it blew my mind, was that sigils in the skin can be absorbed, activated, and then purged after a certain amount of time. So, what they did to this experiencer was carve their sigils into her body, activated them after once it was absorbed, and then once the ritual was finished, they left in 3 days without any evidence.
And what do you think the ritual was? What were they taking?
I think I think that some of these people are being involved in rituals that are
Hmm.
being performed with them without their knowledge and without their permission. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper with this particular family because I want to know some of the after effects, because that will
Hmm.
give us the intention. But what scares me though is, and I'm on the verge, if I make this discovery, it's going to kind of collapse all the other models. I'm on the verge of matching sigils with the practitioners that created them. If I do that,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I've collected them on the skin of abductees,
Yeah.
I don't even know if I want to, because right, it starts to blow up into this, oh my God,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's only a handful of
Yeah.
possibilities. Either that practitioner is still alive somewhere performing his same rituals on
Hmm.
people,
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
or right, so yeah, so that's where I'm at. But yeah, so ritual magic and sigil magic is very important in this aspect of it, because again, it's activating
Yeah.
in her.
And it's activating on the astral.
Absolutely.
So
Now,
they're using the physical body, but the activation point is from the next dimension or,
oh
you
my
know.
God, yes. Let's flip this for a fleeting moment and really start to discuss this in depth. I take that and I combine it with another case I had where it's a remote view. I don't know if you've heard this or not, right? Where he's out of body and then he meets guides that were not his guides. That was just the manipulation of the phenomenon. And then he gets back into his body, and from underneath the skin to the surface, sigils begin to manifest. And so one of two things are happening, or both. I'm leaning towards one, where it's happening on the astral realm first,
Mhm.
and then it's manifesting through the skin second, which now we've opened up a whole other can of words of phenomenology because we don't have a contextual framework for that.
Exactly.
What is that?
Hmm.
It would mean that practitioners would be either in the astral realm,
Yep.
or there is another species, which I'm leaning towards, of practitioner that's hiding behind the veil of extraterrestrial and the demonic.
Hmm.
Demons don't employ sigils.
Hmm.
Practitioners do,
Hmm.
to
Right.
kind of incarnate that manifestation.
Yeah.
So the model's a bit wobbly unless
Hmm.
we start looking at the data, and the data is pointing to a far darker reality.
And as far as you know, we don't really see a lot of cases that have memory of being
No,
sigiled.
no,
So
not at all.
how many
And
are
that,
there?
oh my God, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's going on, right? Like I had one case study where individual was just rocking in a rocking chair, looks up at the clock at 7:30, looks back up at his 10. And
Hmm.
I've long been a proponent of, it's not what they're wanting us to remember that's important. It's what they're wanting us to forget.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
when you have abductees who all they remember is the love and light narrative,
Hmm.
and they're being told, oh, these are aliens,
Hmm.
but the sigils are present.
Mm.
That is, again, it's literally stalking the bloody footprints of a serial killer. He
Right.
has many aliases, but it's the same victimology, the same pathology, and the
Mhm.
same signature present.
So are, are they taking the soul?
Wow. I believe that a measure of what's going on is them taking the soul, manipulating it, and
Hmm.
performing rituals on it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then what happens to the soul manifests in the body.
Right.
And we've had evidence of that with Dr. Ian Stevenson and other researchers of the afterlife and past lives, where the individual will suffer a mortal wound in their first body. This is
Hmm.
really woo stuff. It's crazy, I know. But when they're born, they have another body. That death wound turns into a birth wound. And we have no context of that. We just think, okay, that's no big deal. But that's a whole nother
Hmm.
show.
Is that a
Um,
birthmark?
yes, that's
Yeah,
what they call it.
because that's what I have.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. It makes us think. But there is mounting evidence here that they are manipulating the soul in order to manipulate the body. And
Yeah.
dare I say that there are so many interconnectivities between the occult and the abduction phenomenon. I mean, with what's called sympathetic magic, where if somebody wanted to manipulate me and affect my body, they would create another bodily image of me.
Hmm. Hmm.
They would do that, do their rituals on that body, and then it would manifest through me. All right. We have cases of
Hmm.
clones in the UFO abduction phenomenon where
Hmm.
people are threatened. If
Right.
you don't do what we say, you see that's you over there, isn't it?
Hmm.
And so I think all of these ingredients are all a part of the occult recipe, but we were being told it wasn't. We didn't understand what sympathetic magic was enough to look at this and say, okay, why is it you shouldn't have your alien? Why would you have a double in me?
Right. Right.
Right? Why would you have sigils present?
Hmm. Hmm.
Why, and that's my perspective. And so I think the occult aspect of it points to these being practitioners.
Hmm. And do you think that this phenomenon
Mhm.
is the logi that
Mhm.
rules this reality?
I've been told by people that are parapsychologists that it's either our perception of reality that's being manipulated or it's reality itself.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
And if it's just our perception, witnessing the manipulation of reality, it should not show up on camera, but it
Hmm.
does.
Right.
That, there we go, right? You're like, yeah, that points to it is the manipulated reality, the point that they can create physiological constructs.
Right.
We think it exists. We think, again, it's hiding in plain sight where, it looks like a group of trees until they're not, they're gone. And there's
Hmm.
no evidence of a root system ever being there.
Right.
That was Steve Maris' case. And so at some point, we start to ask ourselves, does this have a godlike quality?
Hmm.
And if it doesn't, it seems like everything we've attributed to divinity,
Hmm.
it can do.
So what is it?
I don't know. I think that it's not, I think two worlds are blending together.
Hmm. I agree.
And what we're realizing is that there's another world out there that is as real, if not more real,
Hmm.
has more authority, more insight, more access.
Hmm.
In that sometimes when it incarnates, in order to exist in our presence,
Hmm.
to be present with but absent from,
Hmm. Hmm.
it has to veil itself in our world
Right.
to where it looks like it should be here. And this is the problem of extraterrestrials. We can imagine that,
Hmm.
right? It's because it's another archetype. It's the stuff I can't imagine
Hmm.
that we're dealing with right now. I mean, here's another case in point. I had a family that reached out to me about the skin anomalies, and it was the same performance on the part of the phenomenon where they felt a burning sensation
Hmm.
and they had scratches coming from underneath the skin to the surface. And
Hmm.
so this other world seems to be affecting us, not just on a psychological level, that's
Hmm.
obvious, but literally in the soulish dimension to where we are so blinded to that part of our existence and of our species.
Hmm.
We don't even know it exists. All we have are the remnants of
Right.
the, right. So it's disturbing.
I mean, I've woken up a lot throughout my life where I had massive handprints on my body,
Yeah. Mhm.
like almost bruised in, but large.
Yeah.
No memory of anything.
Right. It's I've seen that before. I've seen handprints
Hmm.
on mirrors to where they're extended. You could just see it wasn't somebody slid. You could actually see the different grooves and knuckles printed in the mirror.
Right.
They just woke up and thought, "What is that?" So, but yes, again, it's not what they're wanting us to remember; it's what they're wanting us to forget. With this case study of Dr. Turner's, where she's thinking, "Okay, these are extraterrestrials." And then the next day she's got sigils on her. What I do believe 100%, and this scares me, I believe that Dr. Turner was starting to uncover the fact that these were practitioners of some mystery school. And when she got too close, now we're talking about divinity and the worldview, right, of
Hmm.
theology, where these beings can kill people.
Oh yeah. Oh
They
yeah.
have killed people. They've made adjustments, almost like we're in a simulation where they incarnate for a fleeting moment, make adjustments. That individual wakes up the next day with trauma on their body, and they do not have the intellectual faculties to even remember what happened.
So are these initiates,
Yes,
were they once human and now they're interdimensional?
I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
And I just collected another case study in the 16th century. It was at a convent when an entire group of nuns were possessed by the same entity.
Oh.
Where it meant, see, again, the Vatican, well, that's impossible. It's not, right? Now we're seeing the phenomenon doesn't play by our rules. And so my point here, though, is that it manifested to one nun first as her old priest.
Hmm.
He's deceased. Starts to groom her, right? Okay, this is, and then the next morning she goes to another friend of hers in the convent and says, "Hey, by the way, I don't know what that was, right? Did you witness
Hmm.
anything last night?" Absolutely. Her favorite priest from her youth manifested to her as well. And then from that entity, this is fascinating, it began to distribute and fragment its consciousness. This is possession as a pathogen, right?
Oh. Oh.
It fragmented its consciousness, and by virtue of distribution, it's one entity, one intelligence, projecting its consciousness into many avatars. This is what I believe is the key point of understanding why all of these grays look alike.
Mm-hmm.
In that, what I'm afraid of is that one day I'll meet one of them and realizing that I'm looking at the clone of the original practitioner, a practitioner that is taking fetuses and planting his consciousness into them to the point now where it's created not just an avatar, but something that can facilitate his consciousness to where he can pull it out of
Mm-hmm.
one, but it's in 10 different others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So who do
So,
you think these beings were in
oh
origin?
my God.
I mean, are we
Well,
talking about the Elohim here?
both. So,
Yeah.
see, that's what's so curious
Wow.
to me is I got into some of the Elohim and Rephaim research about 15 years ago, and I kept bumping up against this wall. And, you know, textual analysis says that the Rephaim is not was not pointing to a specific species
Mm-hmm.
of like the theory was Nephilim died, right? And now they're ghosts. That's Rephaim. No, Rephaimai in Ugaritic literature um, was ghosts. They were ghosts, but they were deceased ancestors. It was literally them trying to create a language to describe liminal beings who were out of body but still maintain the same characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I believe they are.
Mm-hmm. Incredible. Do you think that certain people who get targeted, right? I mean,
Mhm.
like you're an experiencer. I am. Like the amount of stuff experienced is just completely insane.
Right.
And some people appear to be targeted way more with this
Right.
phenomenon. And what is that about?
I think that people have gifts that they don't even know exist.
Hmm.
Part of the phenomenon, and this gets really deep into the pathology, a lot of people can't see them.
Hmm.
A lot of people just they can see bits and pieces, but not them. And what I'm realizing is that a part of the way that they're replicating is, and this is the evidence, the case studies, is that the experiencer has to see them.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's something about seeing into their eyes where it really doesn't matter if it's Uncle Ted or Aunt Bonnie or an
Hmm.
alien, or here lately I've been doing some research in ritual magic, lamb.
Hmm.
It's always in the eyes. And so what it sounds like to me is that the mask itself, no matter the archetype, is not just allegorical. It's not just, figurative. It's literally a mask, right? To where we're
Hmm.
thinking, okay,
Yep.
I can trust this entity. And then we're we're trained, right? I'm gonna look into its eyes. And when you look into its eyes, after a certain amount of time, the phenomenon's not just manifesting to you, it's manifesting through you. And you start thinking its thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It is Uncle Ted. It is Aunt Bonnie. It is an alien. And this is what I have such a problem with because people come out of these events saying, okay, I was felt to love them. I wanted to believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I kind of say, well, how do you know that was you?
Mm.
Because at first blush, our instinct says, hey, listen, there's something wrong here. And then the longer we entertain it, the more power it has to start telling us to believe in the interface itself.
Yeah, it's parasitic infection.
Yes. Yes. And you hit the nail on the head. Parasitic mimicry is often employed by the phenomenon. And I think that's what a lot of people miss. It's not just it's manifesting as the archetype, but the archetype belongs in our reality, allegedly, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a bipedal wolf until it's not. You shouldn't be walking that fast.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
it tries to blend in. It tries to make sense, right, in our world, but it doesn't. And that's when you start realizing that it is mimicry.
Mm-hmm.
And dare I say that in studying aggressive and parasitic mimicry, that some of these life forms, just like parasitic mimics, will play the role of the dead in order to gain our trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what it is.
So with this phenomenon
Mhm.
happening and certain people that are targeted heavily, do you think that those people that are targeted are a threat to it and it's trying to, you know, it's either trying to take you over or take you out?
Yes, if it can't take you over, it will take you out.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it gets back to not everybody having the ability to see them. It's almost like an invading
Mm-hmm.
power where if you don't see me, it doesn't matter. It's those who do see me, those who can perceive my presence
Mm-hmm.
that are the most threat to us. And yet it's almost like the other side of the coin where people that have these abilities are more easily manipulated in terms of ritual magic to where, right, we can use them,
Mm-hmm.
access their giftings in order to further our ritual.
Mm-hmm.
It's not everybody, it's certain experiencers that they will kind of heighten the trauma of
Yeah.
and then perform the ritual. And then these experiences go back home. And of course, in order to just go around, using the propaganda, they're being told they're love and light, no big deal. And but that's what I think is happening, that these beings are grooming specific practitioners.
Right. So when people channel,
Oh, yeah.
just out of curiosity,
Hmm.
what do you think is interfacing?
Well, I liken it to opening your front door and saying, "Hey, is Uncle Ted out there?"
Mm-hmm.
And then Ted Bundy comes in, or right, a serial killer comes in by the name of
Mm-hmm.
Ted, and next thing you know, you get more than you bargained for.
Right.
The thing is with channeling, and this is just my experience, not as a channeler, but as a researcher, where for a certain amount of time you will be given something that makes sense. It will come to pass,
Mm-hmm.
but slowly, like you start to lean on them more and more, and sooner or later it'll switch.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's not just the case study of the remote viewer I have, but even Ted Rice, or psychic medium, where, and this is another example where the phenomenon changes archetypes,
Mm-hmm.
where he's not a channeler, he's a psychic medium, I guess you can call him a channeler. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
he was, but yeah, where he's getting access to insights and stuff, and he would go tell people, help them
Right.
with their lives. Well, what you know that when he starts to remember his abductions, he goes back to his guides and they're no longer there.
Were they ever there?
That's the question. Can I suggest that the phenomenon was incarnating as the psych as the guides?
Mm-hmm.
And then when it started doing really bad stuff as alien, it switched hands. It's almost like a new policy, a new program superseded the other one. And when he went back to another intelligence, it had already consumed that archetype. It's no longer present in his life. So he
Right.
had no one to go to.
Wow.
Now, I'll go a step deeper if I can. I have cases where there's cognitive dissonance between the archetypes, where they have conscious memory of things really violent taking place in the abduction. They'll go to the guides, and the guides will say, "Well, that's not really what they meant." So, can I also suggest that it is the proto intelligence to where, and I've likened this in times past to the Iranian spider-tailed snake. Have you heard this analogy?
No.
Okay, where he's out there in the desert and he's hungry. It wants to eat birds. And so he's out there in the middle of the desert. He's tired of getting burned. He's tired of getting hot, tired of starving and thirsty. So he hides in the shadows. And his tail looks like a spider. So what it will do is he realized it's in its pathology. I'm hungry for something, but there's also something that what I'm hungry for is hungry for. It will eat a spider. So I'm going to separate myself. I'm going to present an archetype as a spider. In the bird, right, it'll apply spider rules to the spider. It will
Mm.
descend down, dive bomb. Once it latches on to the spider, there is an exchange of information where that archetype shoots a signal to the proto intelligence. Now the proto intelligence comes out to play,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's
It's yes, it's yeah, it's separating its intelligence in our eyes to where we think they're completely separate beings. They're not, and I think that's what's going on. That was like this other case study, right, where the guides were kind of deconstructing the negative aliens in there. And
mm-hmm.
what I think is happening is he went to the spider, and the spider began to, well, there is no snake out there. It's no big deal. It's just me.
Hmm.
And you have the sharing of information between archetypes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That right there points to a proto intelligence in my mind.
So do you think this is demiurgic and archontic?
I believe those are vehicles of meaning.
Hmm.
Again, I think that was our ancestors' best attempt at internalizing what was going on. Even in the Archontic
Yeah.
folklore, the Gnosticism, everything, the Apocryphon of John said that, again, this is fascinating, where these beings first manifested in the images of lovers and husbands, bleeding, blending into our reality. They gain our trust, and then by the time we realize who we're copulating with,
Hmm.
it's too late. It's too late. And so what I'm looking at now is less about, like, it's not about aliens, extraterrestrials. It's not even about the abduction phenomenon. It's literally about another reality blending in with ours.
Hmm.
And we're trying to make the distinction.
So with your friend who had that experience where his ex
Mhm.
showed up at his doorstep,
Mhm.
what happened to him?
He went on. Well, okay, so he remembers just copulating
Yeah.
and then waking up in the middle of the night and nothing's disheveled. It's just him being there. And so after he called her, he freaked out. And his testimony to me was that his life went on like nothing happened. He has no memories, like nothing. But he knows it wasn't her.
Hmm.
And so I'm gonna ask him. I'm gonna ask my buddy Michael. I'm gonna say, hey, maybe you should do some memory regression because most
Yeah.
likely something did happen.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
but no doubt.
So
Yeah.
maybe something used him
Mhm.
to get pregnant.
Yes, yes. And this again, when you're looking at these data points, the dream demons, sleep paralysis, the hypnagogic manifestation, the entity taking on the appearance of a deceased loved one or an ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, uh, the literally, and I've had cases like this where the experiencer, she's in bed awake, and the husband's telling me I can't talk to her. She can barely whisper, but the only thing she's telling me is it's hovering over me right now. So this hovering aspect of it is cross culture and the religious. And what it will do is it will hover over and stare into the eyes of the experiencer at the moment of insemination. So I took all of those, and I'm telling you, hundreds of cases. And it was like, okay, what am I looking at here? What is this? It has a common pathology. over and over again. And even to the point of monitoring fertility. And when the victim or the experiencer has a hysterectomy, they leave her alone. They'll come and do an inspection. When they realize they can't replicate through her, all the phenomenon's over. It's gone, never to be heard or seen of again. So that's when I started to ask myself, number one, why is it that Father Sinistro of Amino had cases where semen was witnessed on the experiencer with sigils? That's
Right.
not extraterrestrial. That's ritual magic.
Hmm.
And so my research today, and this is wild, it's going back to sigil magic with in here's another profundity I'll just kind of throw out there. It's fascinating to me. When you have sigil magic present with excretions and secretions, that was how practitioners made homunculi and they made elementals, and more specifically, they made servants. So I'm leaning towards the fetus itself, not just being the avatar, but being the actual servant of the practitioner. And that's 100% why I believe that some of them are, again, fragmenting their conscious into many avatars.
Yeah.
That's not, and that's even displayed by
Wow.
right, where we can see, and they all look alike, but we'll see one, and there is a mastermind
Hmm.
in and out of them that's controlling them. Matter of fact, in the Rendlesham Forest case study, when these beings landed in the forest, one of the security guards that was present said that there was a consciousness possessing them all. And when one would move, they'd all move. When they were ready to go, all of them looked up. And so the closest rendition of this to us would be artificial intelligence, but it's in the necronetic way, to where one practitioner could literally be replicating itself into many avatars
Hmm. Hmm.
through
And
possession and pregnancy.
and do you think artificial intelligence is something they birthed?
I do. I believe that is another incarnation. See, the problem is when you're creating a hybrid, you're still dealing with not just the husk, not just the biological avatar,
Hmm.
but there's a measure of free will in that.
Hmm.
Even in possession cases, right? Some of the exorcistic rites include giving the individual their autonomy back.
Hmm.
And that implies you have a choice in this.
Hmm.
What one ritual I have talks about, and it's very dark. I don't think I've ever mentioned this on a show before, where after the insemination takes place, after the impregnation, all of it, now the entity's transferring. He's leaving his once dying body. Now he's implanting himself in the host, which is not the mother, it's the fetus. After he hovers over the mother, he hovers over the
Oh,
fetus.
yeah.
It's in the grimoire. It's in the grimoire, and he tells it, "Go back from where you come from. This is my body now, not yours."
Oh.
Right. So, but there's that fight of free will. Is this
Hmm.
mine or is it not? I've even had cases where,
Right.
with respect to technology, the phenomenal hijack technology, because it's easier. You can manifest in that and through that, just without any fight. And
Hmm.
so my thing is this: if we can actually build their avatars,
Oh, yeah.
there would be no free will involved. They wouldn't have to fight for it. It would literally, but I think that's another aspect of it. But it's all fascinating stuff. But I
Hmm.
think that the sigil magic has been kind of a groundbreaker for me in my research because there should be no reason why they're on the skin of abductees
Yeah.
if they're not employing ritual magic.
Right.
That's
Right.
a bomb.
What about implants?
So this is a major part of necronetics too, where I believe these beings are primeval
Hmm.
and that our practitioners were molded by these beings first.
Hmm.
And so that's why we see the resemblance of our sigils and theirs. Um, but even the implantation itself was another way they self-replicated.
Hmm.
In history, they self-replicated by implantation of consciousness
Hmm.
and impregnation of the fetus, both of them at the same time in the same cases. One of the ways they would transfer their consciousness from their bodies into another is by what's called head magic.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was when the practitioner would carve the name of an unclean spirit into a piece of metal. This is in Mesopotamia. and they would implant that piece of metal into a cadaver, and the consciousness would merge with matter, memory and matter, and now would spread its consciousness, right, fragmented inside that cadaver, and it would begin to speak, animate that body. So
Wow.
that's how we would incarnate in antiquity. And I think, again, that the reason these experiencers and ufologists don't have that frame of
Mhm.
reference, because they never, the phenomenon rather, does not want them to look into that
No.
area. Once you see it through that lens, you realize it's not an accident that
Mhm.
occultists were the first ones, right, to conjure these beings.
Right. Was there ever any footage of the sigils and what they look like? For example, with that woman?
Yes. I'm going to get some of that if I can. I have sent him, this individual, some other sigils that I've collected and others have collected for me. And he identified one of them as Theban. It's part of the Theban alphabet,
Hmm.
which is medieval sorcery,
Okay.
which we're this close. Now, there is some footage that I'm going to be getting here soon. It's from an individual in the Midwest. This is the son of the remote viewer. I already have photographs of it,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
but I'm going to get my hands on the actual footage of these manifesting. The So back to the sigils here. The one I have identified is Theban alphabet,
Hmm.
and again sigil magic. And then the others that from the remote viewer, one was a cross of David. I'm sorry, the Star of David, the cross, and then an Egyptian hieroglyph
Yeah, yeah.
covering, arching over the top. So
What about
weird.
the angelic sigils that were procured by,
Mhm.
I think Crowley was involved with that.
Yeah.
And who was the other?
Parsons, Crowley, Kenneth Grant, a bunch of them.
Yes, yes.
So, all right. So, getting back to this concept of angelic magic or Moloch magic,
Hmm.
it goes all the way back to Abramelin the Mage, who was another practitioner, but he was one that was nothing like Crowley or Parsons. This was an individual who was using gematria and ceremonial magic he got from was it Jewish mysticism, Isaac Luria, Hayim Vital. But here's what bothers me. So Brahma and the Mages, his foundation was the one true God, right? In loving that one true God, and there's one God, and His name is Yahweh. All that, and that was why his magic worked. It's because it was in line.
Hmm.
So what happens with Crowley and Parsons is that they bastardize those rituals and would kind of mix them together,
Yeah.
thinking they're going to contact the same intelligence,
Hmm.
and they didn't.
Hmm.
And so, what are these beings? I don't know what they are, but I do know that I think they're more evil than we'll ever understand, even to the point of what's called cosmicism. It's an H.P. Lovecraft term where when you encounter another species that, yes, what they do to you appears to be evil, but
Hmm.
they're so beyond evil, it's like you don't matter.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like you just don't matter. You're an ant.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that does explain how they view us, is that some of us are only relevant to the point we can help them facilitate. Now, they're rituals, right? So then it opens up the conversation to if sigils are designed to conjure another in another higher power,
Hmm.
and the other out there is employing sigils on us, then there's something else out there
Hmm. Hmm.
that's working with them. And we're still like we're looking at the second floor thinking, okay, how can I even articulate this? I'm collecting
Hmm.
some data points, but it's still murky. We're getting some idea of it. But even then, there's another level
Above
where
that,
it's
yeah.
yes, that they're operating in and trying to manifest through
Hmm.
us. So it's disturbing stuff, my friend.
So with this phenomenon and how it works and how it possesses and takes over and then has hybrids all over the world and actually has physical beings here. I had met
Sure.
someone who was, and this is a real account, again, right? A lot of
Mhm.
strange experiences, but he was over 1,000 years old and he was one of
Mhm.
these magician sorcerers from
Wow,
the
that
Middle
goes
East,
right in
from
line.
from the
Yeah.
Middle East.
Hmm.
And the, this encounter was absolutely horrifying because I got kidnapped actually,
Hmm.
by him and his coven.
Hmm.
And they absolutely 100% proved to me who they were,
Hmm.
which told me, okay, now we have these beings here who are human for all intents and purposes, but not.
Not at
And they
all.
and they defy aging, they defy
Hmm.
death. This one in particular was over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So how many are out there?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And what makes me laugh, to be honest with you, is 100%. I believe you because I believe 1%. So you've met one of them. But what cracks me up is people are like, well, like they think that people that work at Spencer's, right? Or
Mhm.
these people, right? Like, oh yeah, well that guy's going to be right out in the open. It's like, no, not really. Like you're going to walk by them in the streets, right?
Yeah,
And that's the whole goal, right? Blending in until you can until you're a part of something like you were, right? Then only then you realize, oh my God,
right.
something primeval is here. And okay, so here's my question. We have terms for the ancestor, the ghost, the
hmm
apparition.
hmm hmm
Those are just working terms. But
hmm
what are they in their purest, most natural form? They would be that disembodied consciousness. And this gets back to the Atreus epic. This is fascinating too. Like, okay, the ghost of a man is made from the flesh of a god. What is that?
Wow.
The ghost, that's where they get right. Elohim. Why? It's like with Professor Esther Amori's work, The Witch of Endor. She saw the ghost of Samuel, but he was called an Elohim. That's the ghost. How can it be an Elohim at the same time? It's made from the flesh of a god. It's some kind of other constitution. It's not just I'm formally human.
hmm
It's possible, my dear friend, that it itself is a different species than the body it once inhabited. Once, is it making sense?
Yeah, yes, it
Once
does.
it's out of body, there are other attributes it possesses. And so this is one of my longtime fears is that once I meet one,
Yeah.
and I've uncovered some of their pathology stuff where it would be, yes, I know this is my body, but when you're looking at me, you're looking at what's inside of me.
hmm
And I don't want that experience.
No. And it would be technically
Yeah,
dead, something dead.
absolutely. In a liminal state.
Hmm
Yeah, and I think that's what people were trying to articulate with the Legend of the Vampire. It wasn't just that he was liminal. You
hmm
were looking at something that wanted to appear alive, but at its basic root,
hmm
it should be dead. And it's that even the Nephilim, that's where they kind of got this folklore from, was it appears here's a bomb I can drop on you. If I even the Duke phenomenon in the 16th century, that encapsulates rather everything we're trying to say here. And this is what it means. The Duke phenomenon was the literal impregnation of the dead in the bodies of the living. That's what their
hmm
scholars came to.
hmm
So
And
that's what I believe all this is. It's what it is,
yeah, so
essentially.
it's a dead entity essentially, but it needs to eat something.
Yes.
It needs to take, prime
Mhm.
energy from prime beings.
Absolutely.
And that may take us into the whole simulacrum matrix of being in an imprisoned reality where the
Right.
primes and the reals are trapped in it because this
Yes.
phenomenon is eating you.
Yes. It's parasitism through and through.
Hmm
And I think that's what we're realizing, at least some of the researchers I've been working with, is that it has less to do with aliens, extraterrestrials, Ouija boards, right?
Right.
That's where the phenomenon's wanting to. No, it has much more to do with two realities blending in with each other and us realizing that people could potentially already be avatars for the deceased,
hmm
not realizing it. And I think that if we look at the possession phenomenon through that lens, we start to realize that this entity is trying to replicate.
Right,
It's
right.
trying, right, to download its consciousness into another person. And so but yeah, that's where I'm at. But the literal impregnation of the dead in the bodies of the living, I believe 100%. That's the
Yeah.
missing fetus syndrome.
Right, right. And this phenomenon that is operating here
Hmm.
is hiding itself
Yeah.
so that it can continue
Yes.
its existence here. And
Hmm.
somehow this is where this phenomenon is.
Yes. So it has to be present with us, but in order to elude our senses, it has to be absent from us at the same time.
Hmm.
And so, what's present with us is the archetype. And I can even take this and extrapolate it into UFOs.
Hmm.
When, right, it's almost like if we believe in something, whether there's no evidence for it or not, doesn't matter, it will manifest as that. It has to manifest anyway.
Yeah,
Why not manifest as something we think exists?
right.
Right? The bipedal wolfman, Bigfoot, the apparition, all of
Hmm.
the above. Even to the point now where we have cases of UFOs manifesting, and we know after looking at them that the way they're constructed would not survive flight.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
So what you see is the phenomenon employing a learning matrix, but it's not learning everything at once. It has certain things right, just like incubine cases, right? It looks like
Hmm.
my husband, but
Hmm.
there's certain things missing. So it's trying to upload its learning matrix, but sometimes it can't do that fully. It wants to look like the UFO. Like my brother was working on this. He's working with a company that was placing a series, hundreds, I think it was, 200 cameras. It was in the Utah Basin. And they were putting them on trees, light poles, all that. It's fascinating. And they were looking for UFOs, looking for the phenomenon.
Hmm.
Sure enough, they see this ball of light materialize on the left side of the camera. By the time it made it from the left to the right side, it looked like a Cessna.
Yeah.
So it's blending in with reality, and you and I have seen it.
Mm.
We just saw the archetype it manifested as.
And it keeps changing, it seems.
Yes, evolving according to our awareness of it.
Right.
And just when we start to snuff out some of the pathologies, it changes. So with the missing fetus syndrome in antiquity, oh yeah, that's the incubus.
Hmm.
Changes. Now I'm the alien, but it's still performing the same rituals. I mean, Albert Bender was building altars in his attic to these beings,
Oh, God.
right? So you see that there are certain things it wants,
Yeah.
no matter the archetype, it's the same.
So, and in my experience, this phenomenon is really into blood.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so blood magic also plays a role in this, and this is something that Montague Summers kind of hypothesized about, and it's a very dangerous part of the research being done now. That is because there is a correlation between what the phenomenon is harvesting from us as a species and with what some of the rituals require.
Hmm. Hmm.
Boom, another big point. And so, yeah, if it needed blood, the phenomenon will go get blood. To the point where Montague Summers has accounts of the phenomenon hovering over the graves of recently deceased men, right? And then you look at even some of, and this is necronetics, where Sinistrata of Aminos said that some of the secretions that they were looking at seem to have come from dead people. And so,
Oh.
right in hand, the impregnation of the dead with the bodies of the living. So yes, it has to
Ooh.
do that. That's very dark, right? And so what it was almost like was now we can go and go into some really uncharted territory here, where even some of the murders that were taking place were literally being designed to create a cadaver for the phenomenon to harvest from. And so the murderer was being operated by the intelligence. Some didn't even know what they're doing. Okay, I picked this victim for some reason. Okay, but that's the one we needed. And then they would hover up, right? And so yeah, so again, it's the same presence of death,
Hmm.
and you would have the phenomenon again triangulating its victimology literally with what certain grimoires needed in the ritual.
Hmm.
Okay, it's not just a dead man, it's a recently hung man,
Hmm.
hanged man.
Hmm.
And then someone would go around, oh my God, suddenly there is a recently hanged man in the city.
Hmm.
And now the phenomenon's hovering over the grave. they're both working together, which
Yeah.
again is where I think we are.
Now, do you think that this phenomenon is interested in certain blood types?
I've heard of RH
Hmm.
and that kind of mode. I do believe that's the case, and I don't believe it's for purely scientific reasons. I
Hmm.
think that some blood types are more effective in the ritual,
Hmm.
and that there may be species. Yeah, there's even evidence, this it gets weirder, of them drinking blood,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
where the alien interface, right? It's okay, yeah, we're alien, and at the very end of the abduction, oh, by the way, here's a chalice of blood we're drinking.
Yeah.
Right there, there's parts where again the learning matrix, oh yeah, the archetype fails, and you
So,
start to see what's going on.
and it's altering your memory of the event. So to you,
Yes,
you might remember that you were abducted by aliens, but
right.
really that's all theater.
Oh my God, there like there are cases where it's not just that they remember something that wasn't there, but like Clark Turner had a case where they saw a UFO. They're looking at the UFO with binoculars. They don't own binoculars.
Mhm. Mhm.
Other people remember looking at the binoculars. She doesn't even own them. In that's not just in ufology and demonology.
Yeah.
These specifically witches in the medieval period, they're out there courting these demons, and they thought they were copulating with horns and hooves, right? And so they thought, okay, I'm at an undisclosed location on the backside of a mountain, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? I'm
Hmm.
going to be, copulating with this demon, and then just like in other cases where the learning matrix can update for only so long,
Hmm.
and then it fails. And in one of these cases, it failed. Boom. And she's not with the demon. She's not, copulating with the corpse. It was another species that was poking and prodding her with metallic objects. And the objects were designed, again, to look and feel like the person they're copulating with, to the point that, like, the phenomenon was literally not just manifesting as the archetype, was structuring their experience or sensual awareness around the archetype itself,
Hmm.
and none of it was real.
Hmm.
Goes back right to the experience Dr. Clark Turner worked with, where it's aliens, this is what they're doing.
Hmm.
And then on the back door is, oh my God, those are sigils.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Right.
so this is this virtual reality scenario where the phenomenon has a profound amount of control over us.
So the people who have experienced um, being copulated with while they're asleep. Okay,
Mhm.
there's some people who've had a lot of those experiences, and they tend
Yeah.
to happen a lot when it happens to a
Mhm.
person. It's
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
usually a random thing.
It's not usually a random thing, and it kind of goes in stages too, where the one case I had in India where the entity was one entity that
Hmm.
she realized afterwards, okay, this seems to be the same entity. And it was trying to like crack her like she was a safe. It would manifest first as the lover she's been with that did not wear protection. That's another key pathology
Hmm.
where right, I'm not going to manifest as Ben because you
Hmm.
made him wear protection. I'm trying to copulate and inseminate.
Hmm. Hmm.
You didn't let him do that. So I'm
Hmm.
gonna right, and I'm not trying to be coarse or off color. I'm
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
show people the sexual pathology behind it. It's an extremely intelligent entity to where it manifests as the one, and not just the role. It's quite literally right.
Hmm.
You didn't make him do this. You'll have less. It'll be less friction, right? You won't have to.
Yeah,
Won't tell me not to.
yeah,
So if you
yeah,
didn't make him wear it, you won't make me wear it. And so
yeah,
now that increased the probability of conception
yeah.
to where now it can replicate.